Mona.
Thanks, Cecilia. Can you bring up the slide, please, number 5? Great.
Can you
There's
see
just
it?
one. Yes, I can. There's just one slide, and I'll try and keep this brief so there's more time for discussion. So as you said, the Lao government and some CSA participated in the learning route to Peru, and that was just talked about in the earlier slide. I think just on reflection, before I talk to the slide, when we set about planning for the learning route, we were at a very specific stage of development for the CSA in Laos. We had really just started to set ourselves up. We'd been going for about 6 months at that stage. The Sun CSA Secretariat Manager was very new to the position. We'd been working for about 6 months before she started in her role, and it was one of the first activities she led. And we were still building a foundation for ourselves and developing credibility, legitimacy, relationships. And that was really, so it was obviously a very particular stage of a CSA development, and everyone's going to be at a different stage. The other thing to capture, I know many countries experience this, but locally we have a very restrictive civil society environment in which to work. It's a single-party state. Partnership with local civil society is not seen positively at all, and there's a number of restrictions to local civil society development. For that reason, INGOs, for better or for worse, tend to dominate the civil society scene, and we're significantly stronger than our local counterparts because we have space in which to develop, in which to fundraise and implement programs. And our local civil society partners are much more challenged in their work. I've tried to be very diplomatic in the way that I've expressed that, but other people working in similar environments will probably understand quite deeply some of the day-to-day problems that can lead to. So, you know, we reflected on that, the local context. We were very new, and, you know, the question for us at the time was, how was the learning route going to be best for us as a new CSA? How could we really leverage it? And that's what we did. So we were very lucky. You know, the Sun globally Sun enables us to work in partnership with government in ways that we can't do in other sectors. As part of the Sun movement, we automatically have some kind of credibility. And the Sun movement and the Secretariat in Geneva, in the way it works with countries, regularly encourages government to include civil society, work with the CSA when there's a CSA present and things like that. So that gives us a lot of entry points, and that happened with the learning route. The government was specifically asked to invite a civil society representative, and they did that, and that's what enabled us to join that learning route. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to participate. There wouldn't have been that opportunity for us there. So that was very good. We wanted to use the learning route as an opportunity to build a partnership with our key government partners and develop both personal relationships with them, which we did not just during the learning route, but also in the preparation phase. We did that a lot with them, but also to use it as an opportunity to discuss with them a couple of key priorities that we had. And the two key priorities we had, one of them was partnership with civil society, local and international, and the second one was integrating better gendered approaches and women's empowerment into the way nutrition policy and programming is being done in Laos. Those were the priorities that we identified going in. So then, just if I refer back to my slide. The first thing we did is we invested quite a bit of time in participant preparation, both with logistics, but also thinking about what were the learnings that as participants, both civil society and our government partners, what we wanted to get out of it. So there was a series of briefings We translated some of the English language documents into Lao for them. So, you know, that kind of logistical but very, we think, thoughtful support, as well as verbal briefings and just assisting them to think about what they wanted out of it. The second point I've touched on already, but what we specifically did there is we contacted CARE Peru. CARE is one of the committee members of the Sun CSA in Laos and a member of the Sun CSA. CARE Peru is one of the leading INGOs, I think, in nutrition and how well it's engaged with government, its advocacy work. So we talked to the country director there, Milo, who's also the chair of the Sun Civil Society Network globally, and through the CARE office in Laos, we were able to get some additional support. So, sorry, my thinking was a bit confused there, but what we did is we provided funding for an additional 2 days for the Lao delegation to stay in Peru. It's a long way from Laos, so we thought that was a good investment. And then we worked with CARE Peru and I think Save the Children Peru to host those additional 2 days. And during that time, we worked with CARE Peru and Save the Children Peru to really focus on some additional field visits that looked at civil society partnerships and women's empowerment. So we did that to try and get some added value out of the learning route, but also to showcase to our government partners in Laos the type of added value that working with civil society can provide. We didn't just pay for those 2 additional days, but our relationship with our officers, you know, the CARE and SAVE officers in Peru, is what enabled that to happen, and they could see that. So in terms of some of the lessons learned, I don't think we did enough preparation before the learning route to really encourage cascade learning when the group came back. They do have an action plan, which has mostly been met, but to be honest, looking back at it, it's not terribly ambitious. And the actions in the action plan that the team, the delegation developed during the learning route were already in existing CSA and government plans anyway. So they have been achieved, but I think we really should have pushed it a bit more around the cascade learning, both with our own representatives who went, but also with government. We should have done more structured feedback on return and actually prepared that before the delegation went, worked with them on an agenda, a specific meeting time, developed the logistics around structured feedback before they went, so they were really aware of the expectations of partners back in country when they returned to Laos, and that could have been linked to their action plan, I think, a bit more proactively. And then I think, you know, I would encourage in the future a more detailed action plan, and then in both development partner and CSA, you know, regular meetings that happen. Our committee meetings are every month. The development partners, who, you know, the co-conveners here are UNICEF and EU, and they do include the CSA. They have a quarterly meeting. We could have structured it so that the action plan is then a standing agenda item for a period of time, so that the actions can be revisited and look at how, as a collective, we could support those actions in follow-up. And if they're a bit more ambitious, and I would particularly want to see in the future, you know, some policy advocacy commitments as well, and some of the types of outcomes that you talked about just then, things like a budget support, they're quite a bit more ambitious than the actions in our current plan. So capturing those there. So I think that's it from me. I think there was one other challenge that came up for me, sorry. While you were just talking then, Julia, what came up for me was that shift to critical thinking. And you talked about, is it Procassur's methodology, really focusing on a different, less didactic learning and more critical thinking. In a context where didactic learning is the norm and, you know, we are constantly trying to shift our thinking to being more reflective, more analytical, more critical thinking, that's a fairly long-term shift, as you would know probably better than me. I'm not sure I've seen that shift take place after a single learning route, and I would, you know, so that's clearly a challenge. I just wonder if that's a key part of the methodology, if that also needs to come up in the plan of, in the main actions, the plan of action of the delegation that does the learning route, and then how can the CSA in particular support that moving forward. So that's just the final point I thought of while you were presenting. That's all from me. Thank you.